while people enter the Zoom, you can all admire my update to my office. You see what I've done there?
That Preenland?
That's Preenland.
It's
Every,
getting bigger every week, isn't it?
well, maybe it is, but I think every office and study place should have a map of Preenland readily available. Yeah. How are you guys? I'll assume you're good. Um, okay. Any questions, comments, remarks, discussions, insights? Insights would be good.
I have one question.
Uh,
This is
yes,
Caleb. Caleb
Caleb.
Talley.
Wait. I want to Caleb Talley.
Yes. So
Yes, please.
last lecture we were talking about if you could find cultural preens that are used for all societies, like all human societies. So I was wondering, so could we say that every society assumes that the laws of nature are constant because them being constant is how we discover things through experimentation and whatnot. And if it's not
Okay.
constant, then we just assume that the law is incorrect in some way.
Wait. So elaborate. Oh, okay. Try me again on that because I got distracted. So please, Caleb, say it again.
Okay, so could we say that for a general cultural opinion for humanity, we say that the laws of nature must remain constant? The fundamental laws of nature, not necessarily the ones that we currently have, they could be incorrect, but fundamentally, they are consistent. Could we say
Well,
that?
okay. Let me explore this a little bit. When you say, I mean, are you suggesting that somehow the environment in which preens try to survive is constant, or are you saying something else is constant?
Well, I'm saying physical reality would be constant. Like, for example, we're on a Zoom call right now. The computer's not going to completely disappear out of nowhere. I'm not going to join another Zoom call randomly. We assume that's not going to happen because in physical reality, that doesn't really make any sense. And that's always an assumption that we make to make predictions and to make schedules and to understand how the world works.
Well, several things to say. First, thank you for that question because actually we're going to have a detour today, which may lend insight into that question. Second of all, uh, the way we make predictions, right? Uh, we make predictions uh, not because the universe is going to stay constant, because it's not. All right. And we make predictions based on our best guess now, when we're making the prediction, of what the future is going to look like. And uh, you may think that the universe sort of works in a continuous fashion and we have some idea of how it's going to evolve. But uh, the to me, the dinosaurs were making predictions about the future when they were designing, their genes were designing the next generation. And that their predictions were very good for millions of years, actually, until suddenly their predictions turned out to be terrible. When the Chicxulub impactor came along and said, don't don't care about your predictions, right? Here I am. So we can we can try to hedge our bets on predicting, and but I don't want to suggest that there's some universal sort of smoothness or continuity of the environment on any place in our universe. Abrupt things can happen. So that doesn't answer the question for you, Caleb, but it's a mumble. Uh, Okay. And I think this detour might help shed light on that. Uh, okay. By the way, the detour is what is a preen really? Okay. Because I've given a definition of a preen and it's useful and it's good, for now. But there's a much better one, I think, though still not perfect. Okay. Any more comments or
Um,
questions?
Professor,
Nathan,
this is Nathan here.
Johnson.
Um, what I was thinking, what does a computer simulation of preens look like, right? What do you think is there a pre-existing part of software that you think or algorithm that could effectively simulate preens and its effects on, say, hosts? Um, or do you think that's
Yeah.
going to be something custom here?
Well, I don't know. And part of my not knowing is not being, as up to date or uh, knowledgeable about what's really possible today on computers. Uh, so I don't know. But again, maybe this detour will help us answer that question. But I don't know. Okay, more questions, comments, remarks. All right. So let me see. Okay, so I'm going to begin sharing and we'll do the usual thing. All right. So, Lecture-9, the struggle to survive. Okay, and in particular, here we're going to explain the Hamlet soliloquies struggle to survive. And remember, struggle doesn't mean, tearing things apart necessarily. But anyway, here we go. Oops, that's not where we go. Try this again.
The struggle to survive. Preens are units of information, they are not physical, they cannot replicate. Copies of preens are physical and it is the replication of copies that increases the preen's copy number.
Right? So it's important to the best of your ability, if you can, to distinguish preens from their copies. Just it works out better that way. So a preen is non-physical. It's for right now a unit of information. It doesn't go around replicating, but it has copies and they replicate. Okay.
Roughly speaking, different forms of copies use different methods of replication. For example, genetic preens stored in DNA or RNA are replicated using molecules called polymerases that are found in cells in laboratories. Those stored in computers can be replicated in many ways, for example, by copy-paste operations, by sending text messages or emails, by uploading to or downloading from the internet, or through the action of computer viruses. Let's look at the Hamlet soliloquy preen.
So let's be clear about this. The Hamlet soliloquy preen, we've seen it in brains, stored in brains. We've seen it stored in books, and we've seen it stored on computers. Yes? Now, each of those copies have a different form. And if it's stored, for example, in a brain, it doesn't get copied because I do a cut and paste operation on a computer. If it's stored in a computer, I can copy it that way. If it's stored in a book, I could go to a publisher and he could use that as a template to make more books, for example. Uh, an aside here. Remember we said that DNA, RNA, and computer copies were essentially equivalent, that given one form, we could get the others. Notice that in Hamlet's soliloquy, we can do the same thing. If you have it stored in your brain, you could write it down and even publish it and get a book with it in it. If you have it in a book, you could memorize it. If you have it on a computer, you could get a book or you could memorize it, right? That is, given one form, we can get the others, just like we could with our example, the insulin prene. All right. So it's important to realize that getting more copies depends on the form things are in. Oops. One more time.
Let's look at the Hamlet soliloquy prene. It is stored in written documents, e.g., manuscripts and books, brains, and computers. Those stored in computers can replicate in the same manner as genetic prenes stored in computers. Those stored in brains can replicate through processes like teaching. When a student is taught the soliloquy, they have stored a new copy of the Hamlet soliloquy prene in their brain. Those stored in written documents can be replicated in many ways, for example by using scribes or printing presses. In about 1600, when Shakespeare appears to have written Hamlet, the printing press had already been around for about a century and a half. An author could write a manuscript, take it to a printer, and get hundreds of books made. Shakespeare's 1625 First Folio had a run of about 750 books, and each stored the Hamlet soliloquy prene. The book sold well. Wikipediafy, and subsequent expansions under the title The Complete Works of Shakespeare brought the number of copies of the cultural prene into the millions. The Hamlet soliloquy prene had gone viral. But where was the struggle?
Okay, so where was the struggle? That's a good question, actually. Maybe we can talk about it. Now, I assume a lot of you have read what's here, right? But, did Shakespeare's Hamlet's soliloquy sort of struggle? It seems to have just been, that's what happened. It went viral, right? But there was a struggle, and I want to just describe it.
Ask any budding author how easy it is to get a publisher to print copies of their work.
You guys are probably have experience as budding authors. Now, maybe you've written novels or things like that and tried to get them published. But many of you I know are computer scientists, and you guys will have tried to get papers published, perhaps. Yes? Do you just walk up to whoever the publisher is and say, oh, put this in your next journal? No, you don't. You got to really work hard and make sure you've done a lot of research and have something important to say, and then you submit it to, say, a journal, and the editors of the journal, send it out to people to review it. And it's really hard to get published in really good journals because a lot of people are trying, right? I mean, that's one reason. Okay, so Shakespeare, however, did get published. And one thing, and it made money. You can find that in Wikipedia. And it kept getting republished. And who hasn't, I doubt if even today there's a place that sells books, whether online or in, bricks and mortar, that you can't pick up a copy of the complete works of Shakespeare. Well, of course, I guess if you're running a bookstore that deals with, say, coin collecting, maybe you won't find it. All right? Okay. So back to this.
Ask any budding author how easy it is to get a publisher to print copies of their work. Publishers will only do it if they expect to be rewarded, which typically means they expect to make a profit from selling the books. Publishers understand that those who are famous are more likely to attract book buyers. This is why so many books on bestseller lists are written by celebrities.
Right? I mean, go look at bestseller lists. So it really helps if you're like a former president or you're a Hollywood star or any other way you get, or a, famous athlete. You write an autobiography, it's going to get published. However, if you're just a normal person, go write your autobiography and see whether some big publisher thinks they're going to publish it. It pretty much ain't going to happen. I mean, it happens occasionally. Okay.
Fortunately for the Hamlet soliloquy prene, as the historical record shows, Dobson, 2016, Shakespeare was a celebrity, and this presumably had much to do with getting his works published.
Right? I mean, in fact, Shakespeare was uh, a publisher, and I mean a celebrity in London. He owned the Globe Theater. He was writing all these great plays. Some of his plays were performed in front of Elizabeth I. He was an important guy. Okay. But to see the struggle, I think it's important to look at what happens to other Elizabethan authors who were also competing to get their works
What
published.
about Elizabethan authors with manuscripts that did not get published? They had lost the competition to use the most powerful means that existed at the time to create new copies, and consequently the cultural prenes stored in their manuscripts are very likely to have gone extinct. There are very few manuscripts of plays written by Elizabethan authors that still exist, and none from Shakespeare, Stewart, 2000.
Right. So to me, this is pretty interesting. That is, Shakespeare actually wrote other plays. I think one's called Love's Labors One. I think he had Love's Labors Lost, I think, that did get published, but uh, Love's Labors One did not get published. But we know it existed because it was sort of on the list of things that were published, but no manuscripts exist. Yes? Okay, so that's true of Shakespeare, that he actually wrote manuscripts that didn't get published. But it's uh, also the case that there are really very few manuscripts. Manuscripts means hand. Scripts means writing, written by hand rather than printed. Uh, there's very few from Elizabethan authors at all because manuscripts went away. Okay.
A few more remarks. The advent of the printing press was a great extinction event for cultural prenes, similar to the extinction event that killed the dinosaurs. Many cultural prenes that did not get printed went extinct. See DTD, non-biological evolution, extinction. The printing press extinction is one of many.
Okay, so the printing press extinction, those things that did get printed managed to somehow get printed in this using this new technology and to make copies using it. Those are often still around because they continue to be printed and now they get on the computer. Those that didn't ever get printed are largely lost to us. Those preens have gone extinct. Okay. And it's argued in DTD, this is like the Chicxulub impactor. Okay. when the printing press appeared, if you didn't get on board, you were gone. Or very unlikely you survived very long. Yes? But if you
Sorry.
did get on board, you had a much better chance of surviving.
I might be misunderstanding this. It seems as though there's a little bit of a difference. Like because if I had like a written story, it seems as though that, or if I
Wait,
had
wait,
an
wait, wait. Oh, who's speaking here?
uh Grayson.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
All right.
My confusion.
Um,
Please go on, Grace.
all right. So if I had like an oral story, and then writing came into existence, it seems as though my oral story was sort of destined for extinction anyway. And then writing sort of just saved some small subset of the oral stories from extinction. Whereas in the Chicxulub
Yes.
impact, yeah, things which were not necessarily destined for extinction were destroyed.
Yes. You're saying there's the writing extinction, right? Is that what you're saying? That the printing press, if a prene didn't get printed, then its chances of surviving, say, to our day, were hugely diminished. Are you pointing out that the invention of writing had a similar effect on the preens that were in people's brains?
I guess I'm a little bit confused because it seems as though if the Chicxulub impactor hadn't happened, then we might still have dinosaurs today. But
Yeah.
if writing hadn't happened, I think we still would not have oral stories that were passed down 2,000 years ago.
You're saying because they simply would have died out because it's just a way of passing. I agree with you. So, yeah, it is true. It seems that some cultural preens that were stored in brains as stories or songs may have survived for quite a time. Like, for example, what would be an example of that? Well, geez. What's one that has survived quite a long time just through the oral tradition? I think one could argue that the Quran, which of course did get written, and then when printing press came along, did get printed, but there was also a very strong uh, uh, the meme was also in people's brains and taught in madrasas. Okay, so a madras, probably my simplified understanding, uh, is a place where people go to learn the Quran, and they don't just learn it, piecemeal. Part of the job is to put it in their brains in whole, as a whole. And so there's an oral tradition that seems to have lasted quite a long time. So it is possible to use the oral tradition to sustain cultural preen for a considerable time, but I think that's rare that we see that. Okay, and yes, you know, we may like the form of say the insulin preen that we find in DNA and think that's really the real form. But DNA doesn't last long, not in individual storage of it. And so can we say that once DNA gets on the computer, then it has this whole other way of getting copied. And maybe once it gets on the internet, it sort of never goes away and may be replicated. I don't know. I'm mumbling a bit now. Okay, so
The printing press extinction is one of many.
okay, Nathaniel, Der Hockey.
Sure, hockey. Yes. I guess I was
Yes.
kind of building off of Grayson's point, but
Yeah.
like I don't exactly see how the printing press was an extinction event if like it nothing I don't see how like a piece of writing went extinct from not being printed. If the printing press wasn't invented, it would like already like whether or not the printing press was invented, this piece of writing would go away in 100 years. So who's to say that?
Well, we know examples, and many of them, that like Shakespeare's Love's Labor one, or I probably got it wrong. Okay, where it presumably existed and was performed in Elizabethan England, but it did not make it into, for example, the first folio. And it and as far as we know, all those manuscripts didn't last long. Okay. So if they had escaped over many of Shakespeare's manuscripts, we could say, escaped over into the printing world, but some did not. And those that did not had to rely on sort of the longevity of the, meme tradition, the oral tradition, or they had to rely on the written tradition. Maybe somebody would make a copy by hand, right? Uh, but it turns out that particular avenue wasn't as attractive because manuscripts, in fact, went away, and and but those that made it on board the printing press uh, survived. So very few um, cultural preens that never made it to. Okay, so here's a possible question for you, Nathan. Uh, Tell me about a cultural preen that did not make it onto the printing press, was never printed, that still exists, that existed before the printing press and still exists.
Yeah, I definitely have trouble thinking of one off the
I
top of my
can
head.
think of one.
All right.
I can think of one. Uh, the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. So the Bible, right? So that's
But
one that, yes, I'm
oh,
sorry.
were you saying something that was never printed?
Yes.
Okay,
No, okay. Go on.
I was just I thought like the Bible wouldn't count because you did print it, but yeah, I see what you mean how it was scribed over thousands of years or 1,000 years before then.
Yes. And right. So that's something that for thousands of years uh, did survive in the manuscript uh, as a manuscript. It was copied time and again. Jose Luis.
Sorry. I'm just going to maybe add one more thing about this extinction of Prim. So there are many ideas through history that have disappeared. A lot of classical books that disappear, no? I don't know, Library of
Okay.
Alexandria and all these things. But I want to bring that sometimes these things appear again. And there are these ideas of both convergent evolution in genetics and people rediscovering kind of the same idea later. So in a sense, there's some hope for some prims. I don't know how this your theory kind of accounts for this, but I wanted to. I mean, like sometimes people have an idea, kind of lost, and then eventually that idea comes back. It maybe
Well,
by people or later, and that's kind of maybe a good thing. And maybe understanding how those things happen is interesting.
I agree with you. This is sort of what Grayson brought to my attention. It is the case that some things can go extinct and then go unextinct, right? The undead. And yes, I agree that happens. And uh, presumably some of the maybe not the exact words that Shakespeare used, unless even that is possible. Some of the ideas in Shakespeare, uh, you know, may
in
have been
not
okay.
in the cultural themes, but in the like biological functions, like I don't know, flight has been discovered through different means several times, but it's still
Yes.
the things that fly. There's like bats fly and then birds fly, and they have very different genetics, but still they both fly. So
Yeah, I want to
not
explore
genetic.
that a little bit. I want to explore that a little bit. Okay, if we're going to say uh, things that fly is a preen, right?
Well,
Like
kind of like a question,
birds.
but I wanted to throw out there. Yeah.
I'm sorry, uh, Jose Luis. What did you just say?
Uh, no, I mean I don't know if this is a preen, but certainly is some behavior or some function that gets enabled by some preens, and maybe not the same. Maybe different preens have the same effect, like flying.
Well, yeah, it's okay. I'm good with the concept you're talking about, and I think what you're talking about is in fact a preen, but we'll get to that later. Um, it's interesting that if you think that the concept of flying is a preen, or we accept that, notice that it has not only been invented several different times, convergent evolution stuff. Eyes are another example. But it's also true that uh, the very first modern birds that flew apparently existed at the time of the Chicxulub impactor, right? I mean, we think that modern birds are descendants of those. And let's say, now, how many species of flying birds have existed since 66 million years ago, the ballpark date of the Chicxulub impactor? How many birds species have existed since that time? Well, and then gone extinct. Lots, right? Okay. But notice that the preen of flying didn't care that they went extinct because by the time one species went extinct, 10 other or at least one other species had adopted that. So from the point of view of the preen itself, it hasn't gone extinct. A bunch of species went extinct, but it didn't go extinct because it kept escaping and joining new species. That's why, to some extent, uh, preens are preens are the real objects that are evolving, and species come and go. But the preens can evolve right through the extinction of species. All right. All right. So, good question. Let's see. Then let's go on a little bit. Okay.
The printing press extinction is one of many. The writing extinction is another. Despite the admirable work of archaeologists, the cultural preens of societies that did not use writing are largely lost to us. This includes all societies that went extinct prior to about 3500 BCE when writing was invented by the Sumerians. The internet extinction is happening.
Oh, so archaeologists can discover some cultural preens of a society, but what do we know about societies that went extinct before there was writing? We do our best. Archaeologists do an amazing job, but it's far different from what we know about those societies of the past that did develop writing. The very term history is about means, what happened that got written down, basically. Right? Okay, so this.
The internet extinction is happening now, and there is a frenzied attempt to get various societies' important cultural preens to go viral. Those cultural preens that fail to do so are likely to have little influence on future societies.
Okay. So if you don't go viral on the internet, the likelihood that you're going to have a big impact on future societies, I think, is fairly small, right? It may happen, perhaps it happens, or will happen, but I think it's unlikely. Okay, so Nathan, wait, is that your hand? No.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Okay, go on.
sorry. I still disagree that this would be considered an extinction. For example, Love's Labor 1, you said that was not ever printed and therefore we don't have a copy of it.
No, not and therefore. I'm saying one, it was never printed, and two, we don't have a copy of it.
Okay.
Okay. It isn't
We
that presumably if it did get written, we would have a copy, but I'm saying there is no copy at all. I'm not
okay.
saying, yeah, okay.
But my claim is that if the printing press was never invented, Love's Labor 1 would also likely not have a copy existing today. And therefore, I think it's not reasonable to call the printing press the thing responsible for this preen's extinction.
Oh, I see. I think I'm getting the sense of what you're talking about. Okay. So, let's try to compare the extinction of the dinosaurs to the extinction of these things that didn't get printed. Love's Labor's one. Okay, so in the dinosaur case, we think that the dinosaurs went away pretty rapidly, right? At least large numbers of species we think were dead within, let's say, a month. There, I think there might have been other species that survived for a few thousand years and then died off. Okay, but I'm not sure of that. Now, uh, and the ones who survived, uh, okay, the ones who survived, like various fish and things, and by the way, early mammals, uh, went on their merry way, and many of those species have given rise to other species, and we are the result of those surviving species. So, is it comparable to what happened to the dinosaurs and the non-dinosaurs who didn't go extinct? Are those really sort of the same, or are they not? Help me on this. I understand your question, Nathan. Once again, I don't have a ready answer to how close these things are.
I think I have an idea.
Yes, I'd like to hear it.
I think
Henry Graven.
yes. I think it might be the dinosaurs might be a better comparison to like the printing press making there be an extinction of things like the oral traditions before. So like, the things that were already there, now those cease to exist because the printing press is now the way that preens exist or are shared. Just as with the extinction of the dinosaurs, there was already dinosaurs, and then the event happens, some survive. Same thing with the printing press. Some survive, but in a different form, maybe.
Yeah, I mean maybe, but I think that helps me understand what Nathan is getting at. That is to say, there's a sense in which the Chicxulub impactor actually killed the dinosaurs. But did the printing press actually go out and kill all those manuscripts? I mean, when the printing press came in, did all of those manuscripts suddenly burst into flame and go away? I think that's the gist of your question, right, Nathan? I mean, am I right? Yeah, okay. So, I get it. And to defend what I've already, written down, I'm going to, for now, stick to the idea that this is an extinction and say an extinction is when a bunch of things, that exist stop existing, and those that survive then give rise to new species and the future, basically. But I do accept that you're right. The Chicxulub impactor actually went out and killed all those other things. And that is a difference, it seems to me. So, good question, good discussion. Okay. Now, this internet extinction, right? If you don't make it onto the internet and go viral, for example, if the cultural preens of your society don't get picked up by the internet and go viral, the cultural preens of your society are unlikely to have a great influence on the future of other societies. So it doesn't have to be the cultural preens of a nation. For example, you may have a bunch of cultural preens about a particular group of people may start doing research along a certain line in, say, theoretical computer science. And but that particular group or those ideas don't cause others to join the group. There's been many past, some of which I've been on, which simply sort of dissolved into nothing. Okay. People didn't care. So, but if you can get you, okay. So take the culture of a company. Let's try this. Take a company that makes tennis shoes. You may make great tennis shoes, but you're going to go out of business unless you can make lots of copies, ads, or whatever, get influencers on the internet. You can go and you can try to sell yours through newspapers or books, but the real action is on the internet. And if you don't make it there, you're probably, it seems to me, unlikely to be around very long. Okay. Anyway, I'm willing. Okay. Paul Algozini.
Yes.
Yes, Paul.
I mean, I guess it kind of presupposes that the internet continues to exist. Like, if, I don't know, another asteroid hits the Earth and the internet as we know it stops existing, then I guess maybe cultural preens of societies that did not put their, that were not predisposed to put their information on the internet would be the ones that survive. So maybe it's kind of a part of natural diversity to, kind of a strategy for, um, you know, cultural preens propagating through other means and not, I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding part of what you're saying, but
Yeah, start again, Paul, because that
yeah, I guess just, you're saying that, or to me, it sounds like you're saying that by not getting their cultural preens on onto the internet or going viral. Other societies are those societies are not likely to, um, it says right there, it have little influence on future societies. So, but like if I don't know, that kind of presupposes that the internet will continue existing and that and be influential. But if something were to happen, another extinction event were to make the internet go away, maybe the cultural preens of the societies that do not put their things on the internet are more likely to, and so I mean it's
Yeah.
kind of a part of diversity, really. Some societies will, some societies won't, and it's kind of a form of diversity and maybe a strategy for um, different preens to propagate in different ways.
Yeah. So you raise a good point. Now I get it. Yeah, if we have an extinction event that that wipes out all the computers and all the technologically uh, uh, expert people on the earth, going back to an extinction event that leaves only those uncontacted Amazon basin groups around. Then what good has being on the internet done these cultural preens? And I think you're right. It's hard to argue that they've done very much, right? They have failed in the end. And I suspect, can we classify that under, yeah, sometimes there's very big failures. Uh, okay, so that's a good point, Paul. I don't know how to resolve it. Okay, but it's
I don't know that I'm not really disagreeing. I just, I think it's worth noting that, um, you know, uh, just another strategy for propagating your cultural preens through a different medium, and one may work out and the other may not. And in the end, it's just a matter of, like with the printing press, it was just, um, the the printing press began existing and those cultural preens were able to spread faster than the others, and it's just a matter of what what was able to make more copies more quickly, and the other ones just kind of faded out. And you know while the
yeah.
ones in
Go ahead.
non-internet societies may not propagate quickly, they may ultimately still survive in some form if the internet were to stop existing.
No, I get the message, and I think you're right. And it's another, it sort of resembles to me well, anyway, I think you're right, Paul. Uh, that could happen, and that's another wrinkle of preen theory that I don't know how to, sort of reconcile with everything. I believe it can be reconciled,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't done it because I didn't think about it.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't
so
see it as a contradiction. I think it kind of still fits, but
okay, thank you. Ryan Rubel.
Can we say that right now we're like witnessing the start of another extinction event? So I don't know if you've heard about like the dead internet theory, but there's like this, I think in my mind, very credible theory that within the not too distant future, most of the stuff on the internet is going to be made by AIs because people are like setting up AIs that are just like pumping out articles on websites and stuff. So like if you just search for something in Google, like the proportion of responses from Google that are just AI generated at some point in the past is slowly increasing.
Mhm.
Meaning, arguably, if you can't get your preen into an AI, then it's not going to be copied as much. And then so slowly all of the old like human generated websites are going to sort of go extinct in the sense that they're just going to be buried in so many other AI generated like garbage.
Yes, and I had not heard of the dead internet theory, but I it makes sense. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but I get it, get that idea, and it's a good one. And we might classify this under there's a new player on the block. And the new player is uh, that's playing these games are computers themselves. Okay. And we'll talk about this later, but uh, little story. When I was as young as you guys, I would sit around with my friends and we'd talk about, maybe I told this story that we talk about the end of the universe. Did I tell this story? That okay. We you know, like you guys, I assume do. You just talk about these things. And one of the things we talked about was, how long's the Earth going to be around? And we looked to physics and astrophysics to tell us the answer. And the answer was, well, not more than 4 billion more years because, you know, white dwarfs and neutron stars and our star, and it was going to blow up. Okay. So, uh, okay. And we also, because of my era, computers were around. So people started to ask, uh, will we be supplanted, whatever exactly that means, by computers as, for example, the, smartest beings on Earth, right? And we considered that and basically came to the conclusion that, well, yeah, it might happen, but that like the explosion of the sun, it wasn't really something we had to worry about, right? That is, it was way off in the distant future, if it happened at all, for computers to become the quote dominant species, whatever exactly is meant. And so it has been a considerable surprise, another one of those considerable surprises, the rapid expansion, particularly in the last several years, of artificial intelligence and computers in general. So that now I think we have to take seriously, at least I do take seriously, the idea that we may be supplanted in the near future by computers. And I suspect that a lot of you in the class talk about whether we're going to get supplanted by computers, AI, uh, in the near future. Do you guys discuss that? I assume you guys do.
Yeah.
And what do you conclude? What is your take on that? Okay, no, nobody. I mean, in
Um,
100 years? Oh, yes,
I
Ryan.
was I was gonna say at least on like the like astronomical scale, I think the most likely way that I guess the idea of humans or anything derived from humans, the most likely way for that to spread in like a grand way would be through something like a von Neumann probe. And I don't think those are going to be humans. I think those will just be machines. So I think, at least at a large scale, inevitably it will be computers in some form or another.
Okay, but you're not worried that it's going to happen in a
Um,
hundred years.
on the Earth, it may be a different story. Who knows? But I'm just saying, like, on a grand scale, I think it absolutely will be computers.
Okay, I'm just going to go with.
Yeah, I'm more interested in how soon you think it's going to happen on Earth.
Like
Yeah.
I work in like interoperability and it sounds like some people think it'll happen in like 5 to 10 years, like in like AI like X risk people, and then some people seem to think it'll happen like much later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. I don't, I think it could happen, say, in less than 1,000 years. Whereas I originally, when I was your age, sort of set it in the class of things that could happen in 1 billion years, right? Now I think 1,000 years is not unreasonable. Anyway, uh, okay.
Sorry, I was going to say,
Jose Luis and
have to
Byte.
put my 2 cents here. So I don't know the future like anybody else, but I think we'll merge with computers more than being replaced by them. And if you want to look at some of this, I mean, Isaac Asimov has this great story called, short story called The Last Question that I would encourage everybody to read. It's an awesome, actually, if there's any cosmology, if I believe in any cosmology or origin or end of the universe, that would be it. It's a very short story, and I want to, you can look
Okay.
it up on Wikipedia. And it talks about this. Eventually, we merge with computers. That's kind of the idea.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
All right.
I don't think the current technology will.
Okay. So, right. Uh, all right. So that's a lot of stuff. Now, the detour. So I was thinking, I've given this definition of a prene as a unit of information that can be stored in physical things. Yes. And it's an okay definition for the purpose of just, for example, reading what we're reading. But it occurred to me that a lot of you guys are graduate students in computer science and some in theoretical computer science. And a lot of you also have technical backgrounds and have learned some mathematics. So I wanted to take us on a tour of what is a preen really. This is taken out of DTD. Okay, and I wanted to see what happens. Okay, so I think this is a much better, but not perfect definition of preens.
In What is a Preen? I presented an informal definition of preen. Here I will provide an alternative definition, which is still not exact, but appears to provide a more useful foundation for the development of a mathematical theory of preens. In particular, it will allow for the use of set theoretic concepts. My approach can be traced to the great 19th century logician Gottlob Frege. In Socrates' Bed, we considered your personal bed meme and remarked that it allows you to recognize some physical objects as beds.
So we were talking about your bed preen. Okay, so if you went to this hotel that you've never been to before, you expect to see an object that you would think is a bed. Okay, now let's go a step further. And we can do that here.
There are even physical objects that have never existed and may never exist that you would recognize as beds. For example, one made with uranium-238 that glows, abrogating the need for a night light.
Right? So if someone ever did build a bed made with uranium-238, you'd recognize it as a bed. You might not want to get anywhere near it, but you'd recognize it as a bed. Yes? Now, let's talk about Hamlet's soliloquy. You recognize it in books. You recognize it when you see it on the computer. You recognize it maybe if you go watch a movie with Laurence Olivier in the head of Laurence Olivier. Okay. Now, but your particular Hamlet soliloquy, preen, it may be different than mine. For example, you may speak a second language and be able to recognize it if it's written in a book in that second language, whereas I wouldn't. Okay. So now switch gears and consider this. I'm going to assume no one built the uranium-238 bed. It doesn't actually exist right now. I'm going to assume that. But it is a physical object that could exist, right? That is, it would break no laws of physics. Well, maybe it would. 238 might explode. I don't know. But roughly speaking, it wouldn't break the laws of physics to make a bed out of uranium-238. Actually, it might. So make it a bed made out of some other unpleasant thing that wouldn't in fact explode. All right. So it's a physical object that could exist. Could there exist an elephant that has 7 tusks? It wouldn't break the laws of physics if such a thing were made. Yes, or a building that is a mile high. So think of all of the physical objects that could exist.
Now consider the set of physical objects that could exist. That is, the set of physical objects whose existence would not violate any laws of physics. So, the uranium bed would be in the set, even though, presumably, no such beds actually do exist. The set of all physical objects that do exist would be a subset of those that could exist.
Okay, so consider all physical objects that could exist. And now consider all physical objects that do exist right at this moment in the universe. That's a set of objects that could exist and actually does exist. Yes? You following this? I mean, I hope you are, but we'll find out. Okay? So here's the new definition of a prene.
Let's define a prene to be a subset of the set of physical objects that could exist.
Okay? So it's just a subset, any subset of physical objects that could exist is now a prene by definition. And the only things that are prenes are now subsets of physical objects that could exist. Right? So, for example, the set of physical objects that you would recognize as a bed is now a prene by this definition. The set of physical objects that I would recognize as or as storing Hamlet's soliloquy is now a prene. Okay.
So, the set of physical objects that you would recognize as beds is now, by definition, a prene. Let's call it your bed prene.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you guys a question. If that's what a prene is, oops. If I now just find a prene to be that, what is the copy number of a prene? So take your favorite prene and tell me about its copy number. What would that mean in this setting? Like, how many beds do you think there are in the world right now?
The copy number would be just the number of physical objects that actually do exist, right?
Exactly. So there's these objects that could exist and the objects that do exist. And so given a prene, a set of objects that could exist, there's a subset of them that do exist, and the cardinality of that subset is the copy number of the prene. Okay?
Like it would be like a countable infinity? Is that what you're saying? Or...
Well, that's a good question. So let's, I think, this gets down to the question of physics. How many objects do we think could exist because there's no physical laws against it? I mean, we can think it's finite, or we can think it's infinite. And if we think it's infinite, maybe it's countably infinite.
And
Okay.
also being made, right, as we speak. So I think it would be a countable infinity.
Wait. Say that again, Isabella.
It's also
Please.
being made as we speak, right? Because presumably people are making beds right now in factories and stuff. So
Oh, yes. So those are copies, right? Because they're part of the set of all things that Isabel Lee would point to and say that's a bed. That's now a prene. But the actual number of beds that actually exist are different. For example, the uranium-238 bed probably doesn't actually exist, but if it did, you'd still recognize it as a prene. Okay.
oh, I see. Like subset of
Right.
actually existing. Okay, I see.
Yes, actually existing. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I see some hands up. Okay, hang on. I'm working with this. Oh, okay. Jose Luis, please.
So you may have something to say later, but let me just raise a number of issues. And this is from somebody who has studied a lot of description logics. So from people that come from classical AI, there were this type of subsets of first-order logic.
Wait, slow it down for me, Jose Luis.
I speak too fast. I'm sorry. Okay.
Well,
so,
for me.
no, it's
Okay.
generally too fast and I don't vocalize particularly well. So if you study like more classical AI, it's not very popular now, but there's this, in knowledge representation, there was this field called description logics that they tried to, as this name says, to describe concepts in the world. And they have some particular form and they have some particular complexity and so on. But what you said is essentially very close to defining a concept in these logics, and yes, that concept is supported by the number of instances or objects that you said that comply to that. But in your definition, I see a number of things. One is you're defining a prime essentially as a set of objects, but it's not clear that the prime has a good definition or a short definition. Okay, so when we talk about a prime, you can give it a name, but what's the definition of that concept? I mean, so bed, we have an intuitive definition of bed, but actually defining a bed or a cat or anything else is actually really hard. Is a cat something that has 5 legs? You get into this qualification problem that is really hard.
Wait. Hang on, Jose Luis, because I just want to respond to what you say. It's very much related to what Isabella was saying. Okay, so you said give it a name. You can't give it a name. So let's assume for right now, just for this purpose, that the number of physical objects that could exist is countably infinite. I mean, some of you will know this and some of you won't. This sizes of infinity issue. But let's say it's countably infinite for those who follow. Then I said, take every possible subset, and then that's a prime. Now, how many subsets of a countably infinite set are there?
Yeah, so that's 2 to the n is Aleph 1. It's like another order of magnitude.
Well, whether it's actually Aleph 1 or not,
well, you know more about that.
But... yeah. I mean,
this is not, I think, right?
No, it'd be
Aleph
No.
naught is
Oh, it is
natural.
Aleph 1. Never mind. Sorry.
Aleph naught is natural. Aleph 1 will be the reals and just
Well, hold on. This is one of the most famous and fascinating stories in the history of mathematics, whether 2 to the Aleph null, the number of subsets of a countably infinite set, is actually equal to Aleph 1, because Aleph 1 is taken to be the next cardinality strictly bigger than Aleph 0. That's its definition. Now, whether those two are the same was a huge question in the history of mathematical logic. Okay. And it turned out in a fascinating way. The fascinating way it turned out was, and I'm just going to say it briefly because it's an incredible result, that we don't know if Aleph 1 is equal to 2 to the Aleph null. And we can prove that we can't prove they're unequal. We can prove that there's never going to be a proof that they're unequal, a proof from Zermelo-Fraenkel axioms. Then what's more interesting, that's a result of Gödel's. Then Paul Cohen came along like in the 1970s, 1980s. He was a Stanford professor. And he proved that we can never prove from Zermelo-Fraenkel that they're not the same. That is, we can't prove that they are the same, and we can't prove that they're not the same. Okay. We can't prove either of them. Okay. We can prove that we can't prove either of them. Okay. So that raises some of the most incredible philosophical issues. One bottom line is, the way I like to think of it is, we don't even know what mathematics is. And we have no hopes of ever defining what mathematics is. And there are infinitely many different mathematicses, all of which to our eyes look like they could be the real mathematics. Okay. So the next time, people tell you about, mathematicians have the sort of strictest, most reliable notion of truth of anybody. We don't even know what mathematics is formally and can never know what it is. And there's at least infinitely many contenders of different things that could be the real mathematics.
So anyway,
Okay.
just to make my point a bit more clear. So, well, it's an infinite number. I don't know enough math. I don't know as much math as you do to see if it's really Aleph 1 or not, but it's a very large number. But my point was
Yes.
about the definition of a prim and kind of the description length that you need to define a prim. So you can say bed, and we all have some kind of intuitive understanding for what a bed is. But if I create any arbitrary subset of objects and I would try to give it a name or a description,
Wait.
most of them they will be
Here's
describable.
I can answer
Answer
that.
Then I learned something.
Okay. No. It turns out that in a sense, I won't go to it in depth. There are so many preens by the definition I just gave that they exceed the number of names you could give preens.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's far too many preens for them each to have a name. Okay. So that's
axiomatic definition. I mean, that's I think what you're saying under the hood. No?
Yeah. So okay. So that's where we're at. But okay. So Kaladindi. Yes. Kushal Kaladindi.
Yeah.
You still there?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I kind of wanted to, I guess, I asked a question. I was kind of a little bit confused. The
Yeah.
um because up to this point, it felt like the definition of wasn't necessarily tied to physical object, at least in my mind. It was like it could
Yes,
be cultural, it could be like ideas. So
yes.
when we define it as like a subset of physical objects that could exist, I was
Yes.
I'm kind of like trying to backtrack and figure out how the other like cultural preens can fit into the same like definition. So I guess like I was just wondering how do you like reconcile with that or deal with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Can we save that to the end of when we go through these definitions a little bit? Because
Sure.
it's a really good question. That is, how does this new definition relate to the old definitions? I think it does, but you've once again asked a really good question, and we'll have to explore the answer to that. Okay. All right. So, okay. Um, so we have this definition. A preen is a set of physical objects that could exist according to the laws of physics. And it has a subset of the things that actually do exist in the universe at this moment. And those things are its copies. Yes. Okay. Now, one of the issues that arose, I think this is part of Koshal's question, is all of a sudden we're talking about physical objects, right? Before we were talking about ideas that could be stored in physical things and blah, blah, blah. All right. Now, but we are talking about physical objects. And we now have tied ourselves to physics and, for example, thermodynamics and things like that. So let's take a preen. Let me go a little further.
Of all physical objects that do exist would be a subset of those that could exist. The set of physical objects that you would recognize as beds is also a subset of the set of all physical objects that could exist. Let's define a preen to be a subset of the set of physical objects that could exist. So, the set of physical objects that you would recognize as beds is now, by definition, a preen. Let's call it your bed preen.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about preens now. Okay, so let's take the collection of all things, physical objects, that you would call a dinosaur. Okay. Now your definition may be different than mine, but things that if you saw them, you'd say, that's a dinosaur, right? Okay. Now, what happened to the copy number of that particular preen through time?
Are we counting things like models? Because there are like a lot of model dinosaurs.
That is up to you. See, I wouldn't count them, but if you want to count them, the plastic dinosaurs, then that's can be your preen, dinosaur preen. Okay.
Well, I suppose that
If you,
changes the answer to your question then, right?
oh wait, yeah, go ahead. What?
I mean,
Yeah,
if
yes, it does.
okay,
So my dinosaur preen has to be actually alive, whatever exactly that means, you know, and that's what we mean to exist. Okay, so if we use mine, plastic dinosaurs don't count. Yeah. Then what has the copy number happened to the copy number through time?
Should be 0 if we don't count birds.
Yeah, don't count birds. Thank you. Well, no, it should be 0 today, but that it wasn't always 0, right? Yes.
Like,
Okay.
are we count? So it's like a monotonically increasing number and then it's constant now, right? Or is it 0? Because I thought copy number as in like, so it would be like a constant number right now, not 0, right?
No, 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 no. I understand your question. Remember, we've made a distinction. The prene itself is just a collection of physical objects. It never changes through time. It's just a collection. But the number of elements in it that actually exist in the universe does change through time.
Oh, right. Okay. I understand now. Okay.
Yeah. And the cardinality of that intersection is the copy number. Yes. Okay. So now what could we say about my dinosaur dream? What's happened to its copy number through time? Because now it's time dependent because the universe keeps changing, right? So we get the same answer that we would have got using the old definition, I think, basically. The copy number has, we're guessing, been 0 for about the last 66 million years, but it was probably fairly substantial 67 million years ago, right? Okay. So with this view of things, okay, so with this view of things, now it is physics, right? That is, if you fix a prene, by which I mean some subset of physical objects, let's all pretend we're going to fix the same one, yes? Well, that prene never changes. It's fixed now. What does change is the number of copies it has. Yes? All right. Now, um, so what was I going to say about that? Right. Now, the universe keeps changing. Yes? And depending on what you think the outcome in the long range of the universe is going to be, there's various theories that it's going to just end up as a gray goo. And what's that goo made of? The fundamental particles, maybe? In which case, the collection of fundamental particles will have its copy number. But if our universe ends up as a big goo, a big nothing, then any prene subset of things that could exist that has no fundamental particles in it, like dinosaurs, will be 0. They've all gone extinct. If, on the other hand, um, uh, let's take dinosaurs. Well, a lot of evolution happened on Earth and stuff. Originally, there were no dinosaurs, but then there were dinosaurs, right? So basically, physics now is involved in prene theory. Okay. And let's take democracy, which is a cultural prene. Okay. So, in what sense might democracy be a preen in the sense that I've just described? What do you mean when you say democracy?
So that would be the set of people that do believe in democratic principles as a subset of all of the things that could be.
Yes, that's one definition. Let me give you another definition because I can have my own ideas of what I mean by democracy. So here's another one. It's the set of all nations that I would declare to be democracies. Okay. So, presumably North Korea would not be in that set, but, the United States would. Okay. That's another definition of democracy. But both of our definitions, though very different, Ryan's and mine, they're still preens. They're a subset of physical objects that could exist. Yes? So no matter what you think you're talking about when you talk about democracies, you're thinking about a preen. It's the claim here. It may be different, like there's too many preens for each to have a name. So it's no surprise that we would be reusing names. So Ryan's use of democracy is different than mine, but they're still both preens. Yes. And the cultural preens, let's use Ryan's definition. The number of people who believed in democracy, what was its copy number if we go back to, well, let's say 20,000 years ago? Ryan, how many?
I think zero.
Yeah.
When did democracy start? Greece?
Well, it's usually attributed to Greece. Yeah.
Okay. I
Right.
think that's pre-Greece, I think.
Yeah. Well, yes, it is pre-Greece. Like Greece is maybe 400 BC or something. It's when it comes into existence, I think. Okay, so yes, zero. How many is it now, today? I guess.
Maybe somewhere on the order of 1 to 2 billion.
Well, wait, was your definition that the
I think my
people
definition
had
was
to?
based on people.
Yeah, but was it that they had to know what democracy meant, or was it
Oh, that's
have?
true. If
Yeah,
they have to believe in it, that's a really hard question to answer.
yeah, okay. But nonetheless, whatever your notion of believing in it is, there's a set of people, physical objects that do exist, right? So, okay. So that's how cultural preens work as well. We've been very vague about things like democracy using the old definition and to understand its impact on societies and things. But this definition also, I think, works. Yes. Um, okay. So let's see.
I have a question.
Yes, Isabel.
What about concepts that don't have any ties to like physical things? Like what if they're just concepts that are like diametrically not physical?
Well, like, is democracy such an example?
I think democracy has like a lot of physical manifestations.
Okay. Well, give me an example of something that you're considering.
Like imaginary animals.
Okay. So if I show you uh, uh, a plastic dinosaur,
Okay, yeah.
is that an imaginary animal or not in your mind?
I feel like that's an animal that existed, right? But what about
Well, yeah, you can. Not only does it exist, McDonald's gives away about 1 billion of them every month, I think. So yeah, they exist. Okay, but imaginary animals. So that's a good question, Isabel. So you want to make sure that these imaginary animals don't exist. I mean, that's why they're imaginary, I guess. So, can you give me an example of an imaginary? I mean, I can give you an example. I think you know, uh, Walt Disney has a whole bunch of them,
yeah.
but they sort of exist. So, I guess the question you're asking comes down to, in order to be a preen, you have to uh, be able to go out in the world and say, there's one, that's not one, right?
Yeah. Like it has
And and huh?
like it has to have some kind of physical tie for it to be a preen. It sounds like.
Yeah, I think you're getting at uh, are there things that you could think about that are not preens, uh, uh, or if if there's nothing in the universe that can store them, whatever your concept of imaginary beings are, if there's nothing among all the things that could exist in the universe that you say store the imaginary preen things, then I think you're not talking about a preen.
I see.
Yeah. So, and is that a limitation? I suppose it might be, but I don't know. Okay, catcher Salazar,
I'm a bit
please.
confused because you just said to Isabel that if nothing exists, like nothing physical exists in the world that can store a preen, then is it a preen? But then you also were just saying that, like, for example, dinosaurs over time, preen copy goes down.
Yeah. So,
So I'm trying to understand that, like, yeah.
okay, so catcher. Uh, I may have misspoken, but I don't mean that there's something that actually exists in the universe right now in order to be a preen. But there has to exist at least one object that could exist in the universe in order to be a preen. So remember, there's a difference between the objects that could exist, like the uranium bed, and those that do exist at right now. Yes? Okay.
If I may, I think this concept is a bit. I think your concept of prim is more like just an idea. So as long as an idea has some embodiment, so I can think of unicorns. Unicorns, let's say that never existed. Let's assume that. I mean, narwhals,
Yeah.
but maybe not unicorns as the horse. However, they
Yes.
exist in the sense that somebody thought of them and they are recorded in people's imagination and in books and stuff like that. So I guess any kind of idea that can be stored somewhere, I guess, is a prim. And then
Yeah. Hey, by the way, that's our old definition of preen, isn't it?
yeah, but it's not necessarily that it has to have a physical. I mean, it has to have a physical manifestation as a storage, but it doesn't have to be a real object in any real sense. Like I can imagine imaginary things that never existed or will exist, or even are physically possible.
Yeah, like uranium beds.
Well, uranium beds you could. I mean, in Russia, there are probably a bunch of them in which
Well,
dissidents sleep on. But
okay, but remember, the definition of a preen has nothing to do whether any physical objects exist at this moment. That are members of that set. It's just some collection of physical objects.
Well, I don't think, I mean, there are concepts that people talk about. I mean, like, I don't want to be too controversial, but I mean, people have an idea of God and people think that does not exist in any real way.
Oh, wait. People
but
have
it exists as a concept, certainly. I mean, or many things like that.
Wait.
Zeus.
Hold on for just a second, Jose Luis. You said have a concept of God. Was that the
Well,
word?
I'm trying to say that
No, I just missed. I
ideas,
didn't hear.
there are ideas that will not have any physical implementation other as a record of the idea, but it may not be a physically realizable object. So I think the definition of prene has to be wider. Otherwise, there will be many things that people talk about that cannot really exist in any understanding of the universe.
They
other than
don't have
kind of
to
idea.
really exist. They don't have to really exist. Okay. So can't exist physically. Could not exist physically because their existence would break the laws of physics. So, okay.
Because
So
of
let's.
like Zeus,
Huh?
the Greek god Zeus, this individual
Yeah.
that is somehow on Mount Olympus throw thunderbolts. I don't think that exists or could exist. However, we have that kind of mythological concept.
Right.
So,
So
a prime, I guess, no? A prime.
I take your point. However, um, uh, I am a little. So let's take the idea of a god. Okay. Now, I agree with you, and this is part of what came out of what Isabel said as well. There may be concepts that, and I'm not sure, don't lead us to the ability to say that concept is incarnated in this physical object. And if there are such things, like maybe gods, then prene theory is not talking about these things. They are things that cannot be stored in physical objects. And the definition of prene was, the original one was a unit of information that can be stored in physical objects. If you have something that cannot be stored in any physical object, then it's not a prene.
Okay, so I don't think we disagree. So the concept of Zeus or something like that can be stored in a physical object, in a book, and it's written in many books and so on. So
yes,
it has nothing to do with the reality on the physical universe. It's just
well, I'm happy with this, and I never thought of it, so I thank you. That yes, if you have a concept, if such things can exist, I'm not sure they can. If you have a concept that cannot never be in a physical incarnation, then you have something other than prenes. Okay. I'm not sure such things could actually exist, but I agree that if that's the deal, then yeah, prene theory is not applicable, at least at this stage, to that. And, I hadn't considered that. That's one reason this course is good. Okay, John Machado.
So just to make sure and be very clear, if I said, imagine a car moving faster than the speed of light, that's a prene.
No, wait, because there's physical laws against moving faster than the speed of light, assuming that it's made of things that weren't all going at the speed of light before, but okay, so that's an interesting one. You have this concept of a car that goes faster than the speed of light. And according to physics, no such thing can exist. Yes? So that's an interesting example, John. A car that can go faster than the speed of light. I guess that's a concept, but according to this definition, that's not a prene. I think that's a really good example of this concept thing because it so directly contradicts the laws of physics. Yes? Okay, so the rest of you scholars, what do you think of John's example as a quote concept that is not a preen?
I don't agree. I think it's a preen. I'm with John or Joao.
No, but John, do you think it is a preen?
I think according to the prior definition of preen, it would be a preen because I could write that idea down just like I spoke it, and you can have your own interpretation of it, but you still have the words written down, and you could argue that it's the information, it's not the physical thing, right?
Excuse me. Then of course it's a preen. But you know, if you're talking about, oh, it's written down in that book and that book and that book, then that concept of preen is a preen, right? But if you're talking about it in some sense as uh, you need to see actual cars going at faster than the speed of light, the collection of those things is no physical object can store that concept. And therefore, it's not a preen.
So I think you're going to. I mean, I know enough philosophy to throw names, not enough philosophy to make something very deep. But you're going through kind of a Wittgenstein argument, saying that there's not a reference of your sentence in the real world is not like meaningful and we shouldn't speak it. But that's not what really happened in reality. The concept of God or gods or all science fiction literature that's existed and it affects societies. So it has an effect in the world, even if it's not realizable. I mean, there are plenty of movies about faster than light travel, which so far we think is not possible. Maybe it's possible after all, I don't know. But yeah, so
Yeah,
I think
but if your meme of faster than light is movies that have such a concept in them, then that is a preen, because there's lots of movies that do. But if your concept is actual physical cars that are going faster than the speed of light, there aren't any. Okay. So we shouldn't, just because we use similar words to describe things doesn't mean that they're the same. Another thing that I want to remark is that Bertrand Russell thought that Wittgenstein was the great genius of things. And, you know, he basically, and I've never been able to understand why Bertrand Russell said that or what Wittgenstein was talking about in the first place. So, you know, that's my failure because probably philosophers do understand what he was talking about. Okay, Nathan.
I was
Yeah.
I was wondering about, so if you just consider like a preen as a subset of all the things that could exist,
Yes.
you just say, okay, the set of all cars that could exist and go faster than the speed of light is the empty set. So then, like, is the empty set a preen?
Oh, now,
This is
now,
kind of like pedantic and philosophical, but
okay. Is the empty set a preen? By definition, it is. So, okay, a good question, Nathan. Now we're becoming set theorists. All right. Uh, two things. One is I don't have an answer, but I do have the answer that it is a preen. But I don't have the answer. Is it the catch-all for all of the concepts that have no physical incarnation? And maybe it is, you know, a car that can go faster than the speed of light, that's the empty set. A uh, a uh, a well, that was such a good example. Okay, a plane that can go faster than the speed of light, empty set. So I think yes, if you end up with the empty set, that is the receptacle for all the concepts that have no place to be stored. Okay, I like it. Okay, guys, it's time though. And thank you for that discussion. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it later as well. Okay, so without further ado, or maybe with further ado, I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It was really, really interesting.